I learned about this guy, Dan Wootton, from following Johnny and Amber. You might know Dan wrote some bad things about Johnny in The Sun, false allegations, and now Dan's got false allegations against him, and now Dan got himself suspended from GB News. I've got mixed feelings on this one because this doesn't involve the allegations against Dan, but they do mention that. So I got two articles, one from Sky News, one from Press Gazette, both from September 27th, 2023. The Sky News one is a little newer. It's called Dan Wootton Suspended by GB News After Lawrence Fox Row, and the Press Gazette one came out just before Dan got suspended, but I'm actually going to read that one because it's got all the same details, and knowing now Dan's suspended doesn't really change much. Here we go. OF is assessing complaints over totally unacceptable comments made by Lawrence Fox about a female journalist during Dan Wootton's GB News show on Tuesday. GB News has also apologized and suspended Fox from appearing on the channel after he made a series of remarks about Ava Evans, the political correspondent for an online news site Joe, during Dan Wootton Tonight. The comments included describing her as a little woman and saying, "We don't need these sort of feminist 4.0, who, he said, are pathetic and embarrassing," adding, "Who would want to shag that?" Now that's what Lawrence Fox got suspended over, and Dan kind of had a laugh with him, and Dan ended up getting suspended too. Now I will say, I personally don't think this is grounds for suspension. I mean, at what point do we say, well, that's rude and distasteful, but we're not going to suspend people or fire people over things like this? When I was younger, it used to be you couldn't say certain things, all right? Things basically about mass death. I'm sure you guys know the historical events I'm talking about, that if you said it, you were canceled or suspended or fired or something. And to a lot of people, that was acceptable. I mean, after all, when you remind people of death of their family and relatives and ancestors, yes, that's not what you want. But, like, this isn't about some heavy, serious historical issue or something. This is, a little inappropriate. Wootton has since apologized for his part in the exchange, but Fox has said he stands by every word I said, and that's what you do, man. If you're caught saying something, you don't say, "Oh, I didn't mean it, I apologize," because you know what? You probably did mean it. And if you're honest, then I think more people should respect that. People don't respect honesty anymore, but they should respect that. That's what Fox thinks. But Dan, on the other hand, had this big old apology. "I'm so sorry. I had a lapse in judgment," this and that. Did Dan have a lapse in judgment when he wrote the things about Johnny? Guess not. That wasn't a lapse in judgment. All the stuff he said about Johnny wasn't a lapse in judgment. But, kind of giggling and agreeing with this guy was a lapse in judgment. Okay, Dan. Evans, a former producer at LBC, shared a clip of the comments on X, formerly known as Twitter, with the caption, "Lawrence Fox just did a whole speech on GB News on why men apparently won't shag me," which has been viewed more than 5 million times as of Wednesday morning. Now, here's the thing. I personally think if a woman said that about a man, like, "Oh, he's so toxic, we wouldn't do him, right, ladies? Ha ha ha." Nothing would happen. Nothing. We're not talking about allegations here. We're not talking about, he was in person and he made me feel awkward. Not even that. Just a comment. Is there any case we could point to in history, in the media, with famous people, where a woman made a comment about a man that she was punished for? I mean, the ladies on The View are constantly saying terrible things about right-wing politicians. So why not just cancel them? I mean, I think they have the right to say what they want, but if we're going to be fair, she said to her 100,000 plus followers that the comments made her physically sick. Okay, well, I mean, that's on her, to be honest. There's a lot of people out there that take a lot of abuse. Men have feelings. They can feel physically sick from things too. They go on a little bit more about what was said. Quote, we need powerful, strong, amazing women who make great points for themselves. We don't need these sort of feminist 4.0. They're pathetic and embarrassing. Who would want to shag that? Okay, looks like they said that already. Laughing, Wooten replied, well, look, I'm just going to provide a touch of balance from her because she did actually respond to this earlier today, saying that she regretted her comments, but she didn't apologize. It would be best if they went into, in more detail, what triggered this conversation off, because the way they present it kind of just seems like Dan and Fox just randomly started talking about this. Wooten, a former executive editor at The Sun, added, and she's a very beautiful woman. Lawrence, very beautiful woman. So, Dan's show, he probably had the sense that once that was said, some people wouldn't like it. He tried to, cover it up, make it more fluffy, whatever you want to say. They called Lawrence Fox comments unjustifiable and indefensible. They go on to say that Fox has been suspended. I don't think they need defense. We're not really talking about if you can defend what he said as far as his opinion. He said it. I just don't see why it's such a severe nature. I see why it doesn't fit the programming. I see why it's inappropriate for the show. But, we're not robots following one straight line, and anything remotely unrelated or inappropriate deserves suspension. They say Fox got suspended immediately, but as we know, after this article came out a few hours later, Dan got suspended. As they mentioned, the guy Fox is not going to apologize, and I think that's the best thing to do. Because the more people apologize, the stricter things are going to get. Because then you're admitting that you did something worthy of the punishment. He says he stands by every word he said. Okay, here it is. So what happened was she went on TV and she apparently belittled male suicide. And he said, well, she's in her right to do so and not apologize, but so am I. And yeah, I gotta agree. I gotta agree with that. I have no choice but to logically agree. I'd say belittling male suicide is a lot worse than saying what Fox said. A lot worse. So I'm seeing a pretty big double standard here these days, actually. And it's factual. That's not my opinion. Just look at what's happening. He said it's free speech. If you're expecting an apology, I suggest don't hold your breath. And the part that made me chuckle a little bit is they mentioned the allegations against Dan. Just like when Johnny came out with something in the past, when the allegations were ongoing, they had to mention that about Johnny. So now Dan gets his own medicine on this. No matter what he's involved with, they're going to mention those allegations. And that's really the main thing about Dan. This is a sidetrack. I guess some people might be happy to see him suspended. In a way, it's roundabout karma because of what he did to Johnny, but the details of it don't really sit right with me. So I'm hoping to get back to the allegations against him, which I'm more interested in. But nonetheless, although I agree with Fox, Dan was still careless that he should have known not to air that he'd get in trouble by somebody up there. So it goes to show carelessness on Dan's part. Let me know what you think in the comments. Doing shout outs, special thanks. Thank you to Laura B for sending me this. If you're not subscribed here, consider it. If you don't, I'll be sad, but I'll get over it. See you next time.